Caesar's Legion gets a lot of criticism for their cruelty and inhumanity, but these complaints don't address the fundamental weaknesses of Caesar's Legion, the fatal flaws that doom them to fail. Caesar's Legion is doomed to fail because they embrace military tactics that emphasize honor instead of victory. Tactics that are not well adapted to the world wherein they find themselves. The Legion's entire command structure is entirely dependent on the wisdom of one man. When that one man is gone, the foundation of the Legion crumbles. The Legion is making the same mistakes as the NCR, overextending themselves across too much territory, enlarging their empire too quickly, and in a way that they cannot sustain. And the way they conquer their territory burns away all of the resources they need to sustain their empire, forcing them into a situation where all that's left to consume is themselves. We must remember that when Courier 6 arrives in the Mojave Wasteland, he or she stands in the shadow of the looming Second Battle of Hoover Dam. There was a first battle, and the Legion lost this battle. If you talk with Caesar about this, he likes to pretend that the only reason the Legion lost the battle was due to the incompetence of Joshua Graham.
It's not going to happen again, that's all I have to say about it.
Well, I've heard the commander of the first battle called the Burned Man.
And I've heard it's a bad idea to tempt the wrath of Caesar. Change the subject.
The Burned Man was Caesar's advisor and general when the Legion was originally formed. The Burned Man led us to a disastrous defeat at the dam. On Caesar's orders, the Burned Man was covered in pitch by the Praetorian Guard, lit on fire, and cast into the Grand Canyon. Caesar has forbidden us from ever speaking his true name again. And so we simply refer to him as the Burned Man.
The Burned Man proved dangerous, unpredictable, and impossible to kill. He helped Caesar form the Legion, but almost led it to destruction.
Graham's overconfidence forever branded him with fire. I will not follow his trail of fire into the depths of the Grand Canyon.
However, when we begin to talk with other members of the Legion, we discover that the NCR has one great strength that the Legion doesn't have, and that is long-range snipers.
The NCR Rangers are the biggest threat. Without them, the NCR is nothing.
They are passable foes. Like their citizens, they prefer their war from a distance, and at that, they excel. Their leaders have on occasion shown brilliance. Their Rangers in particular have adapted well to our strategies.
The reason the NCR won the first battle of Hoover Dam is because Chief Hanlon and his crack shot team of snipers picked off all of the veteran legionaries from a distance. The Legion has no snipers, forcing their infantry to cover the entire distance between themselves and the Rangers before their troops can become effective in combat.
We had the numbers, but not the tactics. I know. I was there at Boulder City when we were defeated. We relied too much on veteran legionaries for direction and leadership, and the Rangers exploited our weakness by killing our best from afar.
You would think that after such a humiliating loss that the Legion would change their tactics. 4 years have transpired since their loss at Hoover Dam and the coming Second Battle of Hoover Dam. The Legion used those 4 years to call in reinforcements from the east and to devise a new strategy. Caesar placed Legate Lanius in charge of his army, replacing Joshua Graham, but during that time, they never trained snipers. They have nothing that can match the NCR Rangers on the battlefield, except for one broken howitzer at the top of Fortification Hill.
The best marksmen of the NCR are usually at the rear of any battle. The gun will allow us to strike at them.
The reason for this choice is not because they're stupid, it's because of their tribal culture. As we learn from members of Caesar's Legion, from Legate Lanius himself, and even from former members of the Legion, like Ulysses, Caesar indoctrinates his troops to believe that they are morally superior to the NCR because the NCR uses explosives and long-range weapons.
Their men take comfort in and rely on killing at a distance. They will not have the luxury of such comforts this time.
Caesar has taught us that over-reliance on firearms can only weaken us in the long run. It's why we train heavily with our blades and our fists. Unlike an NCR trooper, a legionary is always ready to fight, regardless of the circumstance he finds himself in.
For the two-headed bear, NCR. They don't have symbols in the same way Legion does. They revere their mines and explosives, guns. That is their religion. Death from afar. Take pride in it. But you killed like NCR, like Hanlon, with mines, bombs, missiles. Killed Legion along with the bear. Like a coward, kills from a distance.
To Caesar, it's a point of pride that his army is flesh and bone. In this example, he's explaining to the courier why he executes any legionary if he were to observe houses Securitrons or any other type of modern technology.
Yes, but then I'd have to kill them. You don't get it, do you? The weapons I wield are forged from blood, flesh, sinew, bone. Mortal stuff. Fragile, even. And yet my legion obeys me even unto death. Why? Because they live to serve the greater good, and they know of no alternatives. House's machines, his technologies. What do they propose? The possibility of victory without sacrifice, no blood spilled, just rivets. That's not an idea to be put in circulation. If mankind's going to survive this moment in history, it needs warriors, not gadgets.
One may criticize the NCR by saying that pre-war morals have no place in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. But using the same logic, we can easily criticize the Legion for holding antiquated ideas of honor and valor, which have no place in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. If all of their enemies use miniguns, rocket launchers, long-range sniper rifles, combat robots, power armor, Tesla cannons, and the Legion purposefully refuses to embrace those technologies on principle, that is simply not adapting to the reality within which they find themselves. They are purposefully making themselves weaker. Now, one may or may not agree with them. There was a time, even in our own world, where it was seen as dishonorable to hide in the shadows during combat, to use foliage as cover. Guerrilla warfare was seen as disgraceful. One of the reasons that American revolutionaries during the Revolutionary War found early success against the British is because the British marched through the streets of American cities wearing bright and colorful uniforms, cherry red coats with long tails, provoking derisive nicknames like Lobsterback and Redcoat from the Americans. Standing atop their horses, with their swords strapped at their sides, expecting traditional European combat, where both sides would arrive on the battlefield, array their forces for all to see, shake their shields and spears, make a triumphant sound, and then kill each other in one big bloody mess in the middle. That, after all, is the brave and honorable way to fight a war. And that is the way that Caesar is trying to run his military. But of course, not really. Despite all of this honor and bravado wrapped up in their melee military, they are not above treachery and deception. This was a lesson we learned early in our gameplay of Fallout New Vegas when we met Vulpes Inculta at the town of Nipton. He used lies to bribe the mayor, and his strategy to take over the Strip involved working with the Omertas covertly to release chlorine gas on the Strip to kill everyone. A tactic that really isn't very honorable. And this is even addressed by other members of the Legion, including Legate Lanius.
A plan by Vulpes. Treachery is a weapon that one should never rely on. I can only hope that the Omertas died when their treachery was exposed. To have the plan succeed only would have sullied the Legion. It does not matter. Victory shall be ours. It shall be swift, and it will be honest. Purchased with blood.
Vulpes Inculta is one of Caesar's favorites. He's clever, he's wily, and Caesar understands how that can be useful to his army, which is why he refused to execute Vulpes Inculta when Vulpes Inculta broke ranks during a previous battle. Instead, he promoted him.
Vulpes is the best of my frumentari. Then in battle against an unimportant tribe, he broke ranks and led his contubernium through a hole in their defenses to capture its chieftain. Well, his Centurion wanted him crucified for disobedience, so I made him a frumentari. Infiltration, assassination, dramatic atrocities to break the spirit of the enemy, and all these things, Vulpes is a master.
Caesar understands the value of trickery and cruelty. He understands that war is not a game. It's not pageantry. All that matters is victory.
Losers don't matter in the history books. He's a fucking footnote.
Which makes it that much more surprising that he wouldn't embrace snipers, that he wouldn't develop a part of his military that could match Hanlon's Rangers on the battlefield. We learned that even if we repair the howitzer at Fortification Hill, even during the Second Battle of Hoover Dam, and even though the Legion invaded through the tunnels of the dam, the NCR snipers are still giving them a really hard time.
Unfortunately, my brothers heading west did not fare as well. The enemy is much more fortified ahead, and have snipers set up at key positions, which keep our men pinned down. In addition, they've managed to beat back our men emerging from the intake tower ahead and secure it. If we could just get rid of those damn snipers, or release our waiting men in the intake tower, we'd have the manpower to storm their positions.
Why is Caesar doing this? He already has an empire to the east. He has already conquered 86 tribes. Why does he need Hoover Dam? Why does he need Nevada? Well, we learned from talking with him and from talking with former Legion members that really it's all about his ego.
The dam, that old world wall. If I'd never laid eyes on it, never spoke of it. But once found, it was all Caesar could see. That, and the flag beyond it, another symbol, big enough to challenge him.
My conquest of the Mojave will be a glorious triumph, marking the transition of the Legion from a basically nomadic tribe to a genuine empire. Just as my namesake campaigned in Gaul before he crossed the Rubicon, so have I campaigned and will cross the Colorado. We have cities of our own, but nothing compared to Vegas. Finally, my Legion will have its Rome.
Caesar's Legion has been undefeated. He is the master of 86 tribes. But off to the west, he heard tale of an empire to rival even his own. An empire that was likewise undefeated. The empire called the NCR.
The most powerful my Legion has faced. Also the first to which I am ideologically opposed. Until now, every tribe I've conquered has been so backwards and stunted, enslavement has been a gift bestowed upon them.
He saw their flag, and he saw Hoover Dam as the great jewel that they could grapple over, and then he saw Vegas as his throne. There are plenty of reasons to want Hoover Dam. The power, of course, would be extremely useful. But for a society that has existed so far by grinding through or consuming uncivilized tribes, a wiser option to sustain the empire would be to continue east, to grind through more tribes, and not to bang their heads upon the iron wall of the NCR. When a civilization and an army develops tactics that come solely from ego, that society is bound to make poor decisions. Now, the Legion has long complained about the poor decisions of the NCR. And you know what? The Legion is right.
The NCR has all the problems of the ancient Roman Republic. Extreme bureaucracy, corruption, extensive senatorial infighting. Greed runs rampant. The government is corrupt, accepting bribes from Brahmin barons and landowners to the detriment of citizens. The NCR is a loose conglomerate of individuals looking out for themselves. It's lost virtue. No one cares about the collective, the greater good.
They're not wrong about their criticism of the NCR. The NCR is bureaucratic. It's inefficient. It makes foolish decisions. And as Caesar says time and time again, they have indeed overextended themselves. But by invading the Mojave, and especially if they move on to California as they intend to, the Legion is making the same mistake. The Legion's empire spans the states of Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and much of Utah. They already have their capital in Flagstaff, Arizona. They are now moving into Nevada, and this is putting a huge strain on their resources.
There will be no failure this time, no retreat, no years of gathering slaves and resources for another assault.
The Legion's only commodity is slaves. They don't have industry. They don't have agriculture. All they export is slaves and what they steal from the slaves they capture. That kind of society can only be held up for so long, because after a while, you eventually conquer every town, enslave everyone who hasn't fled. They then are sold or become slaves to the Legion. Then their only new source of slaves are those whom their women produce, who are not instead given to the other men as wives. In a sense, the Legion is very similar to raiders. They don't produce anything of their own, and they depend on the wealth of those they conquer to sustain themselves.
They don't know how to survive on their own, so they have to raid.
This is something the courier can bring up to Legate Lanius during the Second Battle of Hoover Dam. It is one of the few arguments we can make to convince him to retreat. And that's because once we get Legate Lanius thinking about it, he realizes that we're right.
Anything the West sends against me shall break against the wall that is the Legion.
And they don't need to send an army. Your supply lines will kill you first.
You think we would march without a means of resupply? We have the fort. We will have the dam. Other communities will fall. And we shall harvest as we move west. We only need move forward.
But there are no communities to support you in the West. You've seen to that.
There are many towns, many slaves, ripe for the taking as the tribes from the east were.
What towns? The Legion destroyed Nipton, poisoned Searchlight, and butchered Nelson.
But we do not need those towns. Like Hoover Dam, there is the power within Vegas. We can harness it for our needs.
As Legate, do you really believe that? Or are you taking a chance?
Long ago, when taking Denver, I had to face such a challenge. Many died over many years to claim the city as ours. It was the lines of food and water that nearly broke the Legion's strength, and the lack of tribals near that cursed city. When I felt in that struggle, I felt as I saw the map of the West. The West is a trap. The bear has already been caught in it, and it is dying.
If, because the Legion hasn't changed their battle tactics, the Legion will have to defeat the NCR by simply overwhelming them with bodies,
our warriors will wash over them in a tide of blood, severing arms before they can attack, legs before they can run, and heads before they can pray.
And if in order to do so they have to bring even more troops from the east, which they've already done after their first defeat, then they leave the east unoccupied. Occupied in name only, without the forces in place to hold it. The NCR's weakness is its size. It will take your entire army to hold the West.
That does not mean we would not succeed.
Eventually. But moving your whole army west means losing the east. You see, Lanius, you can't hold both, and you know it.
The east was a hard-fought campaign. Even now, Kaisar drew too much of the Legion's blood needed there for this. Hoover Dam is but a place. I will not have it be the gravestone of the Legion, whether quickly, or as you describe, slowly, by attrition.
Caesar, due to his own ego, is throwing his empire into a war of attrition, and even if he eventually is victorious, his only reward is now the opportunity to try and take Vegas. Vegas, which is defended by 3 powerful families. Vegas, which is the headquarters of House, unless the courier intervenes, and his Securitron army. Taking Nevada is no easy victory for the Legion. It's going to take everything they have. And even if they take both the dam and Vegas, they have plans to move even further west and to try to take California.
Perhaps in time I will be granted the honor of conquering the land known as California. But for now we rest.
As Ulysses says, not only is the Legion stretching their empire far too thin, but the only thing that awaits them on the other side of California is the sea.
I have walked at Kaisar's command across the east into the west, far enough to know Kaisar's word did not drive me, far enough to see at the end. There's no future in the bear or bull. When the Legion reaches the sea, it will turn on itself and die.
with no more land to take, no more towns to pillage, no more people to enslave, all they can do is turn back around and consume themselves. As I said earlier, many have criticized the Legion for their atrocities, but these atrocities are part of their overall strategy. We learned that the reason Volpes and Colta took the town of Nipton, crucifying a handful of them, slaughtering the rest of them, and burning their bodies in a pile, was only to strike the people of the Mojave with fear, and to show the NCR that they could still strike deep into NCR-held territory.
I want you to witness the fate of the town of Nipton, to memorize every detail. And then, when you move on, I want you to teach everyone you meet the lesson that Caesar's Legion taught here, especially any NCR troops you run across.
It was necessary to weaken the West, show that the Legion could strike deep into the places where NCR thought it safe.
Every atrocity they commit is a tactical choice. Caesar learned early on that if his legion did these kind of things, he could make other tribes crumble or capitulate without even having to unsheath a sword.
The Blackfoot were at war with 7 other tribes, each just as pissant as they were. I led the Blackfoot against the Ridgers, their weakest enemy. When they refused to surrender, I ordered every man, woman, and child killed. When next we surrounded the Kaibabs, and they likewise refused, I took one of their envoys to the Ridgers' village and showed him the corpse piles. This was new for the tribes, you see. They played at war, raiding each other, a little rape and pillage here, a little ransoming there. I showed them total warfare.
One could then argue that the reason they don't allow women to become legionaries, the reason they enslave all women they find, and either sell women into slavery or give those women as wives to their legionaries, is simply because it's atrocious. It's simply to increase the infamy of the Legion, to make them even more feared.
If I could just get across the river, I'd be free. Not that I'd try it. I've seen what happens when you get caught. The legate is not a man to be crossed, especially if you're a woman. That's all I'll talk about it.
Now, there's no question that Caesar's use of atrocities is effective. It was effective in the past when he was conquering the 86 tribes, and it's clearly effective now. If we complete the quest Cold Cold Heart and spread word of the Legion atrocities, we cause NCR troops to despair.
What? There's no way. We're miles from the Colorado. They aren't even waiting for the dam to fall. They're already inside the borders. We'll never stop them. Not at this rate. We're doomed.
The profligates' morale is in the shitter. They've occupied the Mojave for years, getting picked off one by one. It'll frighten them. If I can reach out and kill whomever I choose, then they know the only reason they're alive is I haven't tried yet.
And Caesar picked Lannius to be the next legate specifically because of his atrocious reputation.
Lannius is called the Monster of the East because he never, ever shows mercy.
To call Lannius ferocious would be an understatement. In battle, he seizes the enemy in his jaws and will not let go. He thinks nothing of suffering losses, so long as the enemy suffers more.
Lannius is the greatest of my battlefield commanders. Some might call him a great man, but I'm not sure he qualifies. Once, he was the greatest warrior of the Hydebarks, a tribe of the Arizona. Maniacal in battle. Sometimes he'd ambush Legion patrols by himself. When after several months we found and surrounded the Hydebarks camp, their chieftain raised a banner of surrender. The warrior, who was not yet Lannius, went insane with rage. He struck down his chieftain and attacked his own tribe. He killed 15 before they brought him down. He didn't die, obviously. I went to his bedside and showed him the helmet I'd had forged to cover his face. I said he could have it if he'd fight for me. He accepted, on condition that he be allowed to kill the surviving males of his tribe. I said, make it the adult males, and you have a deal.
Legate Lannius has developed a reputation for himself that everyone knows about, from caravanners and wandering traders to citizens of the NCR. Even members of the Legion are terrified of Legate Lannius.
Lannius is savage. Savagely loyal, too, but only to me. He has no love for my Legion. But this has its uses. He has no attachment to his men, no compunction about battlefield losses. All he cares about is destroying the enemy. When another legatus or a centurion fails to achieve results, I send Linnaeus to make things right. His first step is to beat the failed commander to death in front of his assembled troops. Then he orders the ritual of decimatio. The legionaries are lined up in ranks. Every 10th man steps forward and is beaten to death by his brothers. It instills a certain robust obedience. This time my legionaries will be more frightened of the commander behind them than the enemy before them.
Not even his slaves have seen his face. Struck them blind so they can't. Wears a mask. Don't even know if it's the same man. He put Colorado to the sword. Broke the hangdogs by throwing their hounds upon the flames, so they might burn forever in the afterlife. Linnaeus carries all the terrors of the East with him. He's the myth, the weapon the Legion needs.
He beats his slaves, even blinds them on purpose. He sacrifices people to the god Mars in his tent, and he saves other female slaves as tasty morsels for later.
Finally, Mars has accepted my sacrifices and unleashes me.
The man is known as the Monster of the East for a reason, and this is all part of Caesar's strategy to demoralize the people he's trying to conquer. But despite its successes, there are still many problems with using atrocities like this. For one, women constitute 50% of the human population. By forbidding women to join the Legion, they're not making themselves stronger. They're making themselves weaker. Now, one could argue that women shouldn't belong as legionaries because they are physically weaker than men. That's a fine argument until we see how the Legion uses women. As we climb Fortification Hill, what do we see? We see 2 enslaved women being used as pack mules. They're lugging supplies up and down the hill between Caesar's tent and the Legion's encampment on the Colorado. If our argument is that women shouldn't be legionaries because they are physically weaker, then why would we make them haul goods up and down a hill if they're physically weaker than men? The Legion then would be hypocrites if they're forbidding women from joining for that reason. Additionally, if we look at the actual lore of the game, women in the Fallout universe are just as capable soldiers as men. Remember, after all, that the NCR, the empire that has already defeated the Legion once, has ranks filled with women. And many of these women are the most elite warriors of the NCR. Rangers, including Ranger Ghost at the Mojave Outpost. If it was true that having women in the ranks of the Legion would make them weaker, then how did the supposedly weaker NCR first defeat them? The greatest irony in this is that if we fight in the arena, in the middle of the Legion's camp, the final warrior we have to face is a female NCR Ranger. And Otho, the guy who runs the Legion arena, the guy who addresses a female courier like this...
What do you want from me, woman? I'm in charge of the arena, not the cooking pots. Women are beneath notice, as Caesar has taught us. I'm only allowing you to speak to me because you are Caesar's guest. Know your place, woman. Unlike the profligates of the NCR, only men fight in the Legion.
Says the following about the only female combatant in their arena.
I have a dangerous one for you. An NCR ranger by the name of Stella. We got lucky since we rarely capture rangers alive. Even though she's a woman, she's killed every man who's faced her in the arena. Even one of the elite Centurions. With her bare hands. Watch out for her. She's one of the deadliest fighters I've ever seen.
Despite the fact that within the lore of the game, the Legion was once defeated by an NCR army filled with women, and despite the fact that in their own experience they find many capable NCR warriors who can defeat their own legionaries who also happen to be women, they still choose to forbid women to join their army. But even if we were to buy the Legion argument that women don't make good warriors and that's why they treat them the way they do, the Legion is completely ignoring all of the many other things women could do for the Legion if not enslaved. We see this on display all over the wasteland. Women can have great business acumen. They can run companies, as evidenced by Alice McClafferty of the Crimson Caravan Company. Women can be excellent medical professionals, as demonstrated by the followers of the apocalypse, most of whom are women. And some of the best doctors, like Dr. Usanagi at the New Vegas Medical Clinic, is a woman. The Fiends are half comprised of women. The Khans, half comprised of women. The Brotherhood of Steel has women knights and scribes. One of the 3 families on the strip was founded by a woman, Marjorie from the White Glove Society. Everywhere we look in the Mojave Wasteland, we see faction after faction filled with women, and these factions are thriving. By forbidding women having any place of prominence within their culture, they are robbing themselves of doctors, teachers, scientists, useful citizens who could make the Legion stronger. That is not strength. That is foolishness. But we could simply explain this away by saying that this particular atrocity is just part of their strategy of atrocities that they use to intimidate the world. And that may be true, but I think that this, like many of their other atrocities, has backfired on them. Not only has it made their society weaker, but it's one of the major things that people who might have otherwise sympathized with the Legion point to as the reason they oppose the Legion. For example, this is how Cass feels.
The Legion? What about them? There's some caravans that deal with the Legion, yes. And as much as it pains me to say it, any caravan marked by the Legion is safe as houses. They guard their roads, their supply lines. Even fiends would hesitate before going after any trader dealing with Legion. And Legion, from what I've heard, they don't do the stop tolls on the roads or in the outposts like some NCR quartermasters do. Much as I hate the Legion, caravan life would be a hell of a lot easier if they ran the roads. Well, as long as those companies were run by men, and that's the biggest issue I see. I don't trade caps or supply anyone who keeps slaves and treats women like Brahmin in those camps of theirs.
It's the atrocities that the Legion commits that galvanizes many other people against the Legion. Despite the fact that Arcade Gannon has roots in the Enclave, an historic enemy of the NCR, he still opposes Caesar's Legion and supports the NCR despite that, solely due to the atrocities that Caesar's Legion commits.
Caesar is going to enslave or kill everyone in the Mojave. And when that's done, he'll try to destroy the NCR Senate and install himself as its new military dictator. I can't comprehend how Caesar could so extensively scramble your sense of morality to make you think the Legion is a better alternative to anything.
Caesar also doesn't take into account the survivors of these atrocities. What happens if he doesn't kill every adult male? What happens if he misses a woman and doesn't send her into slavery? These people can harbor grudges. These people could band together. These people would have all the reason and motivation they need to oppose Caesar's Legion. And in fact, we find this very thing happen in the game. Ulysses had many reasons to oppose the NCR and the Legion, but one of his reasons for opposing the Legion is what the Legion did to his own tribe, the Twisted Hares.
The braids I wore, they took that from me. Thought it made them more like me, more willing to have Caesar listen. They didn't know what the braids meant, the mark of my tribe before Caesar came. Before Wilpus came for them at dry wells. There was death in that meeting, even while Wilpus smiled, asked for our help against the other tribes. All the while, they were looking to cast our history on the fire, and did. Another tribe, consumed by the bull. Nothing left.
Ulysses loves history. He's heartbroken to be the sole surviving member of the Twisted Hares, the last one who can appreciate his tribal culture and tribal identity. He learned from the courier that one person can make a difference, and so he set out to cut the throat of the NCR by bombing the Long 15 and then observing the Legion until they make a mistake, whence he would destroy them with nukes as well.
I'll start with the west. Let that burn. Then, if the east falters after, I'll bring the divide there as well. Burn away the flags. Begin again.
One could argue that had the Legion not completely annihilated the Twisted Hares, Ulysses may have remained a loyal Frumentarius. Caesar has also created an army and a society that dies with him. It is his force of personality, his tactical wisdom and foresight that is primarily responsible for the Legion's victories. And because of these victories, because of Caesar's success, members of the Legion almost treat him like a god.
You can hardly even hold his men responsible, given how they're practically raised to worship him as a living deity.
But Caesar is not a god. He is immortal, and mortals die. He's the oldest person we find at the fort. And the reason for this is because the Legion doesn't value old men. They only value might, and the mightiest men are young men. We learn from Caesar himself that when members of his Praetorian Guard get too old, they are challenged in battle and killed, and replaced by the person who defeated them.
My Praetorians embody the martial ideals of my legion. Each one of them has done enough conquering and killing to deserve the rank of Centurion. Instead, I invited them to join my guard. So the invitee chooses whichever current guard he thinks is weakest and challenges him. Lucius has been the head of my guard for 5 years now. He was a subordinate guard for 8 before that. No invitee has dared to challenge him yet. Maybe it's an issue of respect. He is getting on in years.
The second oldest person we find at the fort is Lucius. He is the leader of the Praetorian Guard, and Caesar expects that the only reason he's still alive is because the men respect him. If you're a woman, and if you're an old man, you have no future in Caesar's Legion. This is another weakness, not a strength. After all, the mastermind of the Legion's defeat at the First Battle of Hoover Dam was Chief Hanlon, an old man.
I regret not being able to face Hanlon, the one who led them last time.
In many other cultures around the world, elderly people are revered for their wisdom, and this is a wise thing to do because that kind of wisdom can prevent a tribe from making a foolish mistake. But the only man of wisdom the Legion has is Caesar himself. While unspoken, this reality is apparent to many in the Legion, including Vulpes and Colta. If Caesar dies, Vulpes is the one legionary whose voice trembles with dread, because he knows fully well what the Legion has lost.
I'm pleased that you were able to cure Caesar's malady. Though the legate is a fine leader, we yet need the wisdom of Caesar to guide the Legion. This is a moment I'd hoped would not come for many years. Caesar's death puts the legate Linnaeus in command now. Linnaeus served Caesar well as his greatest battlefield commander. With Linnaeus at the head of the Legion, however, I doubt he'll have much use for my services. He prefers direct methods.
It was Caesar who embraced Vulpes and Colta's less savory tactics. His trickery, his lies. With Legate Lannius in charge, everything is going to be about brute force. There will be no subtlety with that man. Legate Lannius is a young man. We learned that he killed his own chief, and then killed every adult male in his own tribe at the age of 12.
He's the best warrior in the Legion. A full legionary by the time he was 12. He's never lost a battle.
Since then, he has lived as a roaring fire, consuming all who get in his way. It is Caesar who can better recognize when to avoid a fight. As we learn from the ending slides, Caesar in his wisdom chooses not to pursue the Enclave remnants.
Merciless in their assault on the NCR, the remnants struck fear into the hearts of even the centurions at Hoover Dam. Well aware of the full extent of their power, Caesar commanded his troops to not pursue them.
But if Legate Lannius takes over the Legion, he pursues the remnants to his own cost.
Caesar's heirs aggressively pursued the remnants into Arizona, losing hundreds of legionaries in the process, and gaining nothing in return.
By placing Legate Lannius as second in command, as the man who will take over as Caesar if anything happens to Caesar, Caesar has doomed his legion, because from then on, every Caesar after Legate Lannius is going to be the strongest, fiercest man.
The legate is a fine warrior, and the Legion will do well under his command.
With Caesar dead, I'm afraid for the women. The legate is a brutal man, and he enjoys inflicting pain.
I've heard some bad stories about this legate. I'm not sure I'll be welcome around here once he takes charge.
Not the wisest, not the smartest, not the most charismatic, not the best leader, but simply the guy that can wield a sword the best in battle. That's not a smart way to choose leaders for your civilization. It is Joshua Graham, the former legate, the man who stood beside Caesar as he founded the Legion, who fought alongside Caesar to build the Legion, the man who led Caesar's armies at the first Battle of Hoover Dam, the man who likely knows Caesar better than anyone else on this earth, who sums it up the best.
I think only Caesar can lead the Legion. I've never met anyone who could take his place. I couldn't. I never had a mind for logistics. I don't know Linnaeus, but from what I've heard, he has no interest in leading anyone, unless it's in battle. No. The Legion dies with Caesar. What follows now are just the last steps of a man who does not yet realize that he's walking dead.
But Caesar's greatest mistake is that he thinks he can predict the future. He appeals to Hegelian dialectics as the proof that the NCR's failure is inevitable. So you'll destroy the NCR because you hate its inefficiencies?
No. I'll destroy it because it's inevitable that it be destroyed. It's Hegelian dialectics, not personal animosity.
But the problem is that he's treating Hegelian dialectics as a science, as an inevitable. But it's neither of those two things. It's a human world philosophy. Hegelian dialectics, briefly summarized, is that in politics there's always a proposition and a counterproposition, a thesis and an antithesis. Whatever is produced after their inevitable conflict is a brand new thesis, or a synthesis. The idea goes that the conflict trims both ideas of their fat, removing from them their weakest parts, and when they join together in something new, that new thing is stronger for it.
Thesis and antithesis. The Colorado River is my Rubicon. The NCR Council will be eradicated, but the new synthesis will change the Legion as well. From a basically nomadic army to a standing military force that protects its citizens and the power of its dictator.
In Caesar's mind, he sees the NCR as a thesis and the Legion as an antithesis. Therefore, according to Hegelian dialectics, their conflict is inevitable, and that conflict will be good, ultimately producing a synthesis that is stronger. But their conflict is not inevitable, because Hegelian dialectics is not a scientific theory upheld by observable evidences. It's a philosophy. Philosophies can be believed, they can be followed, but they cannot be proven. Therefore, this conflict is not inevitable.
The man's a megalomaniac. He acts like this is some preordained cycle we're returning to. Of all the people who could learn from our past mistakes, he goes and throws all of our knowledge off a cliff. Instead of trying to learn from the past, he recreates it, runs back over the same old barren ground. What's the point of surviving the war? Why did the founders of the followers crawl their way out of vaults to bring knowledge back to the wasteland? So we could act like the last 2,000 years didn't happen? Play dress up so we can fight ancient wars all over again? Everything makes sense to Caesar because he's twisted everything to his worldview. He's Caesar reincarnated. The NCR is the corrupt Roman Senate. I wouldn't be surprised if he thought the Colorado River were the new Rubicon. He abdicates responsibility to a myth of historical inevitability. But he's not Caesar. This isn't Rome, and he isn't going to get away with this.
We see the failure of Hegelian dialectics at the first Battle of Hoover Dam. Thesis and antithesis met at the walls of the dam. The Legion lost, but didn't change. There could have been synthesis had they learned from that experience and changed their tribal culture to allow for a new fighting force that could defeat the NCR Rangers, a Legion sniper force. But they didn't. They just changed leaders and decided to find a backdoor into the dam. And the NCR is the same way. The NCR didn't become stronger after winning the first Battle of Hoover Dam. If anything, they became weaker. The war of attrition went on for much longer. They removed Chief Hanlon as strategist, the good leader of the NCR Rangers, and replaced him with General Oliver, an incompetent leader. Caesar uses Hegelian dialectics to attempt to predict the future, but he can't. It is not inevitable that the Legion and the NCR will clash, and despite all of the NCR's flaws and its horrible bureaucracy, it's not inevitable that the NCR will fall apart. Ulysses made this same mistake during the Lonesome Road DLC. His solution was to bomb both the NCR and the Legion, because in his mind, both of those flags and the societies they stand for have failed.
The symbol I destroy, it has already proven itself wrong.
but we can reason with Ulysses and convince him that the battle between the NCR and the Legion needs to play out on its own. If Ulysses really wants to prove that both societies are doomed, he should allow history to play out. Arcade Gannon makes a similar argument about the Legion. If the NCR really is doomed to fail, then it'll fail without Caesar's help.
If the NCR is broken, it will fail on its own. The people who live here don't deserve to be victims of your misguided attempts at political engineering. Or are they just collateral damage?
Now, the Legion is a sight better than many of the tribes in the wasteland. Having the Legion control an area is a lot better than having that area controlled by raiders. Even Ulysses admits that it was better for the Legion to control certain areas as opposed to them being raider-infested wastelands.
Walk the east too, before the bull came. Then, much like the Mojave before the bear, tribes, towns, clutching to life. Bull did a better job.
But when compared to a greater civilization, one that embraces modern technology, one that allows 50% of the human population into their ranks, one that actually allows doctors and medicine, the Legion is ultimately doomed to fail. They're doomed to fail because they're overextending themselves just like the NCR, because in order to take the dam, they have to bring all of their troops from the east, or even if they take the dam without doing so, in order to take Vegas, they have to take all of their troops from the east, leaving them unable to support their empire, because they make certain atrocious decisions that ultimately weaken them as a faction, because their entire economy is supported by slave labor, slaves which are not an infinite resource, and because their success and entire command structure is tied to one mortal man. That said, the Courier is of course the wild card in all of this. Despite everything I just said, the Courier could still cause the Legion to win. Of course, their influence could cause the NCR to win as well. But I believe, based on the evidence we've seen, that even if the Legion does win the Second Battle of Hoover Dam, their empire cannot last as successful as it is beyond the lifespan of Caesar. But those are just my thoughts. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I publish many new videos each and every week here on my channel, so if you want to make sure you don't miss my next one, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I've got a brand new shirt in the shop for all of you Legion fans out there. The profligate's days are numbered. This beautiful portrait comes on shirts in a variety of both men's and women's sizes and in a wide array of colors. It also comes on other products, smartphone cases, mugs, pillows, posters, prints, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with a brand new video.